Hey everybody, it is ASIC Eric, and we're going to talk about offsets and back spacing and rear ends and all kinds of stuff today. So you can see I have this wheel tucked up in there about where it's supposed to go. It's pretty close. I think it's about centered in the wheel opening. I think all is about good there. Now where it's sitting right there, it is hitting the seat belt hump in there and is just touching the inside of the lip right here. So it's making contact in both places where it is right now. As I mentioned in the other video, with this thing pushed all the way back where it's hitting that seatbelt hump, the measurement we get from inside of the wheel to inside of the wheel is 58 inches. And I'll go over all the specs and dimensions on that and talk about how I calculated the rear end size and all that. But I'll drop this down here and show you the stuff inside there that I was talking about. Alright, so on these second gen Camaros, your trouble spot is right here. This hump right here is this right here. Is right where the seat belt is, the rear seat belt. So that thing sticks out about 1.5 inches to 2 inches at the fattest part. I don't know if you can see, there's some scuff marks on there where the tire's been hitting. So the tire comes to about right here. So one option you have on these cars is to get the big hammer out, beat the snot out of this and flatten it out basically, and you can get yourself another inch and a half of space there. The other option you have is the lip here. You can roll this lip up and get yourself some more clearance that way too. So as I was saying, with these wheels, again, these are 18 by 10 inch wheels. We're making contact here and here in both places. But pushing the wheel, like I said, as far as you can go this way, really, is a 58 inch 58 inch distance from the inside of the wheel to the inside of the wheel. So let's go look at, I made some drawings so we can show how all this works. So starting with the stock wheels, one thing I didn't realize when I was doing all the math on my wheels was I thought the stock 15 by 7 inch wheels were a zero offset wheel, which meant the mounting point to where this would attach to the drum would be in the center of the wheel. Well, it actually isn't. It's offset by 1/4 inch that way. So the wheel's actually, since this is a little further out this way, the wheel tucks in a little bit from where it would sit naturally. And for those of you that don't know, and I hope I have all this correct, I think this is right. I'm trying to go over this as many times as I can to make sure I get all this, understand it. So how all this stuff works is, if you have a 15 by 7 wheel, the 15 by 7 is from the outer edge of the barrel to the outer edge of the barrel, and the 7 would be from the inside of the lip to the inside of the lip. So that's basically the wheel mounting surface. So if you look at the tire mounting surface, so if you look at the dimensions of the tire, that's what you would have. The actual wheel itself is bigger than that by 1/2 inch on each side. So the lip sticks out 1/2 inch this way and out 1/2 inch this way. So your overall dimensions are actually 1 inch bigger. So a 15 by 7 is actually a 16 by 8, as you see here. The back spacing is measured from the mounting surface to the lip, not to the inner edge. So you're not trying to check the back spacing against the 7 inches, you're trying to check it against the 8 inches. So for a zero offset wheel, being an 8 inch wheel, a 4 inch back spacing would be right in the center, but this is a 4 1/4, so it's 1/4 inch further that way than a zero offset wheel. Now here's all the dimensions for a theoretically stock Camaro. I didn't measure all this stuff before I took my car apart, but I think this is correct. The drum to drum distance on the stock rear end is 61 inches. I was talking with Moser today and they said 61 1/8. So it's close enough. We're going to call it 61. And then if you apply all this geometry here, what do you get? So if you take that 61 inches there and you take off from there the 4 1/4 backspace on each side. That gives you this dimension right here. So from the inside of each wheel rim lip to the inside of the other is 52 1/4, and if you go to the outside it would be 68.5. Okay, and then the other thing that I did for calculation is where would the center of the wheel be. And if you measure from the center of the wheel to the center of the wheel, which is theoretically, if I don't know if it was done this way from the factory, but theoretically the center of the wheel opening there, you get 60.5. So that's all stock, which is not what I'm doing, but that's what you have. Okay, now you go from there to the wheels that I have. Okay, so the wheels that I have are 18 by 10 with a 4 1/2 inch back spacing. So if you go through all of this stuff again, same idea. So 18 by 10, those are the inner dimensions there. So that's really a 19 inch by 11 inch wheel overall. So since it's an 11 inch wheel overall, a 0 back spacing on this would be half of that, which is 5.5 inches. But I went with 4.5 inches, as I mentioned a number of videos back when I got the wheels. So that moved the dish of the wheel in by an inch to give me more barrel here. So that's a 4 1/2 inch back spacing. Okay. Now, when I got those, I assumed that that was basically a stock wheel would have been a 5 1/2 inch back spacing, and I didn't realize this had this extra quarter on it. So I've actually taken 1 1/4 inches off of each side, not an inch off each side, from what the stock equivalent would have been. Okay, so that means between the two wheels I'm 2 1/2 inches more narrow than the stock rear end should be by a pure math there. And if we take the drawing here, now what I did here is I said, well, let's go back a second. So I said if I'm 2 1/2 inches less than what a factory setup would have been, that would put this at 58.5. And as I mentioned in the last video, I measured 58.5. If you pull the wheels a little bit off of those seatbelt humps, that was 58.5. So I did actually get a measurement that makes sense there. And like I said, if I mash them in as far as they'll go, I get 58 inches. So that's what I used for this measurement here to see how everything matched up. So with 58 inches, drum to drum equivalent, you have 49 inches from the inside to the inside compared to 52.5, right? So you're a full 3 1/2 inches total further in, so 1 3/4 inches closer to that seatbelt hump. And in this direction we got 71 versus 68.5. Okay, so same thing there. Is that right? Yeah, 3 1/2 inches. Same thing. So 68.5 versus 71. So they stick out further by 3 1/2 inches total. Am I doing that right? Yeah, that's right. 3 1/2 inches on each side. So it's sticking out further this way and sticking out further this way. Okay. Now, if you take those two and split the difference, you'll see that it's what it should be is 22 inches between those two. These wheels are 11 inches wide, so that makes sense. So if you do the center distance now, it's 60. So center of the wheel to the center of the wheel is 60. Up here, we get 60.5. And as I said, when I ordered this, I didn't realize that extra 1/4 inch of offset there, backspace. So if you account for that, then I would have 60.5 if I had done it that way. So I am 1/2 inch narrower than the stock equivalent would have been, which is fine. So that is as far in as I can get those things. So now what does that mean for the rear end? If I order the rear end at 58 inches, I'm reasonably confident I couldn't really install those wheels much further in. I would definitely have to clearance those seat belt humps to get it to work at all, because they're rubbing up against it right now. And even at that, I will still probably have to roll the lips a little bit. So I can't really see going much less than that. I might be able to get away with a little bit more than that, but that's 58 inches is pretty tight. If I went with the 58.5, which is what I measured by getting them off of those seatbelt humps, then I've got to roll the fender lips more, or the quarter panel lip more. But then I'll be within a 1/4 inch of that seatbelt hump, which might be okay. And then I don't know what other clearance issues I might have with the rear end and stuff. It's got the 4-link in it, which has offsets for the control arms to allow for wider tires, so that's probably not going to be an issue. But anyway, so talking with Moser today, what I decided to do was I'm going to go ahead and order it at 58. So all the dimensions you see here basically. And then I'm going to try and get that to fit as is by massaging the seat belt hump, and probably still going to have to do a little bit of the fender lip. And if that's still not what I want, I can put a couple of spacers on here, like 1/4 inch spacers or something, to move the wheels out a little bit. And then I'm okay. But at 58, I'm fairly confident I'm going to be able to get it to fit. You saw how the wheel was fitting up inside the wheel well. It was pretty comfortable up there. There's not a lot of room I have to do on the fender, or the lip, to get it to fit. Just a slight roll, I think, would be it. And that was about as high up in the travel as it's probably going to go. Maybe a little higher than that with the suspension travel, but it's probably pretty close to that. So I think this number is going to be okay. I hope so anyway. I didn't really feel comfortable going any more narrow than that, because I potentially would have to have some pretty big spacers on there, and I don't really want to have big spacers on there. And then to account for that, on the rear end, with disc brakes, they suggested 1 3/4 studs. To account for the 1/4 inch spacers I might want, I went ahead and got 2-inch studs, the 2-inch screw-in studs, which will give me an extra 1/4 inch of thread there to account for any spacer I have to put in there. So that's good. So I went through all of that with them today and ordered the rear end. So the rear end we ended up going with is, hang on a second. All right, so I have all the specs here today. So what we ended up going with is we have the Moser M9, which is a Ford 9-inch housing. We went with 31 spline axles. They said that that's good to up to about 600 horsepower, which I'm probably never going to be pushing that. 400s, low 500s. I'm not going to go any crazier than that. Went with the Wave Track differential. That comes with a lifetime warranty on the differential, or whatever the heck it's called. Got the Willwood Dynalite Pro brakes, which should resemble the brakes I got on the front, with the drilled and slotted rotors with the red calipers. 1350 steel pinion, the aluminum case. What else? I guess that's probably all the most interesting stuff. I don't know if I said or not. 389 ratio. Going with the T56 transmission, the close ratio one. People will say between 370 and 411s, depending on who you talk to. So I kind of split the difference and went with the 389 to 1. I know it's kind of guesswork, but hopefully that's okay. The good news is you can change the gears if you need to. So especially on the Ford 9-inch, it's so easy to do. Just pull that carrier out, and then you can swap the gears around. And just all the other stuff. I got the universal parking brake cables and stuff, the flex lines for the brakes, all that stuff. I think I covered everything else. So anyway, that was a big ticket item. That's the first real big purchase I've done on this car. The first of the few. Transmission and engine coming up. Going to be chunky as well. A lot going on there. Anyway, that's the rear end. So Moser has generally a 2 business day build time for something like this. If you're getting it powder coated and stuff, that adds a little bit of time to it, but I'm not doing that right now. So that rear end should be here around next Friday, so end of the month, end of July. And then I've talked about this before, but what I need to do at that point, the rear end will come, got to put it under the car, mount up all the 4-link hardware, get all the brackets on there where they're supposed to be. I'm just going to tack them all on because I don't trust my welding skills for suspension components and stuff like that. So tack everything on, and then there's a back brace that goes on the housing that you can't really put on until all those brackets are there. So once I've tacked all the brackets in place, got it where it's supposed to be, it goes back in the box and gets sent back to Moser. They will install the back brace, finish up all the welds and everything for me, and then they will paint it, powder coat it, whatever, and then ship it back to me. So there's a couple of weeks flight time back and forth for all of that stuff. So this thing's not going to be resolved until mid to late August probably, before everything's all taken care of, assuming I can stay on top of it. So in another month or so, it should have the rear end sitting down on the ground in the back and good to go. Anyway, that was a lot of information, but I know a lot of people don't really understand all this stuff of offsets and backspacing and all that stuff, so I thought I'd cover that in there and give you at least my take. If I got anything wrong, let me know. Put it in the comments. I think it's all correct. But anyway, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.